I'd like to ask Cindy Schild to respond to the issue of the potential environmental dangers. It's only been a year since we had the blowout in the Gulf on a blowout preventer that was supposed to prevent any possibilities of a spill into the Gulf. Your response to the issue, the concerns about the potential environmental hazards of this line?
Sure. I mean, safety is a top priority, and pipelines have been the safest mode of transportation. We certainly take every incident seriously and try to learn from every incident and investigate every incident. New standards have been put in place since the offshore incident, and based on the State Department's assessment, the 3 assessments on the environmental review, the recent review has indicated that this pipeline will exceed all other standards. There's 57 special conditions within this permit, should it be approved, and has stated that the State Department has stated that it will be state-of-the-art, that its safety will exceed all others.
Earlier this year,
talk about
just
safety?
Before Jane, earlier this year, ExxonMobil faced mounting criticism of its cleanup efforts after one of its oil pipelines ruptured and leaked 42,000 gallons of crude oil into Montana's Yellowstone River. Montana Governor Brian Schweitzer insisted the Keystone XL pipeline will be safer and not vulnerable to similar catastrophes. And Jane Kleeb, I'll get your response to both Governor Schweitzer as well. This is Governor Schweitzer speaking on PBS.
Actually, in my conversations with TransCanada, the companies that proposed the Keystone XL, they've assured me that, A, they use this boring technique so that none of these pipelines will be laid into these river beds. And secondly, instead of having humans involved in the shutoff devices, you see, this device that was placed along the Yellowstone River was actually controlled out of Houston, Texas. Yeah, you got it. In Montana, they had controls in Houston, Texas, and after some 7 minutes, they started shutting the pipeline down. It took about 30 minutes. TransCanada has explained to me that across every river and stream in Montana, that they would have automatic shutdown valves and backed up systems by humans so that this kind of catastrophe would not and could not occur. First, the pipeline is not in the river, and secondly, there are automatic immediate shutdown systems, which ExxonMobil did not have in the Silvertip.
Governor Brian Schweitzer of Montana. Jane Kleeb of Bold, Nebraska, your response.
Well, unfortunately, Governor Schweitzer is actually being misled by TransCanada, and if you listen to his words, he talks about TransCanada's assurances. And I can tell you that farmers and ranchers in Nebraska do not feel good about TransCanada's assurances. And we brought 2 folks from North Dakota to Nebraska to talk to our state elected officials because one of the folks, Bob, he was on site for TransCanada's first spill in North Dakota that essentially sprung a 60-foot high geyser of oil. And when he called in to TransCanada's, 1-800 line, which is what they were told to do when they see something go wrong on the pipeline, TransCanada said that this must be a prank call because it's not showing up on our sensors. And so you can have all the fancy sensors in the world, but practical experience with TransCanada has shown us that they don't have the safest pipelines ever built. And, our first responders along the route of the pipeline are very concerned because TransCanada essentially comes in and they literally give first responders and landowners a brochure that has a 1-800 number on it and say, if a fire, if a spill, if a leak happens, call this 1-800 number and we'll take it from there. But it could take up to 6 hours for an emergency response team to get to a place where there is a leak or a spill in Nebraska. And they essentially tell the first responders, your job is to keep people away. We'll come in and deal with it. That's not a good emergency response plan. Our first responders should know the contents of the pipe, which TransCanada continues not to tell us. And so they wouldn't even know how to respond to a fire because they don't know the chemicals that are mixed with the tar sands. And so there are a lot of unanswered questions about safety. That's why there are a lot of congressional reviews and a lot of letters from U.S. senators as well as state senators in Nebraska that want to have these answers before President Obama and Secretary Clinton grant this permit.
Well, I want to thank you both for being with us. Jane Kleeb is Executive Director of Bold Nebraska, one of the leading activists opposed to the Keystone Pipeline. Thousands are descending on Washington for this next 2 weeks while President Obama is on vacation, but they'll be at the White House engaging in civil disobedience and other acts. Cindy Schild, thank you very much for being with us from the American Petroleum Institute. This is Democracy Now!, Democracy Now!